go.
That way I won't feel guilty.
Okay. Well, Jenny, it's so nice to finally meet you.
So nice to meet you.
Yeah. I feel like we're both food bloggers from way back, right? I mean, when did you start your blog?
Yeah. 2010, March of 2010. And then,
Okay.
yeah. And I think even then I was like, man, this blog thing is over. I don't know why I'm starting.
Yeah, that was a later. I mean, I was 2004, not to brag. So I was like
Wow.
early. But I
I
mean,
did not know.
yours, I remember when yours came, I mean, it really caught fire pretty quickly. I feel like you had the form down perfect when you started. Like when I started was like, not sure what I was doing. I was using like flash pictures. I was like,
Oh, I mean, that's very nice of you to say, but I can't
yeah.
even look at what I used to write like back then. It's so hard
It
to
is
really.
funny. Yeah, it is like cringy to like read my old posts, so I don't do it
Mhm.
either. Well, I wanted to congratulate you. I just got in the mail your new cookbook, The Weekday Vegetarians, which I'm holding up for people who can't see, which is everybody. Uh, and
Thank you.
I just saw on your Instagram that it's number 3 on the bestseller list. Congratulations. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, I'm truly shocked and delighted. So thank you.
Can you tell me a little bit about the genesis of the book?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's just like everyone else in the world. We were trying to figure out ways to eat less meat, and for all kinds of reasons, not any one in particular, but obviously, climate change is a big one. Our health, we're not getting any younger. We're watching our parents get older. We're in that stage where, my in-laws are not doing great. My parents are getting older, and it's top of mind. Like, how do we stay healthy, or how do we try to stay as healthy as we can, even though we
Mm-hmm.
know that's not everything. But so the other big piece of the puzzle was that my kids, my kids are now in college as of a week ago. I have no kids in my house,
Wow. Okay.
which is
Wow.
which is a whole nother story. But at the time of the genesis of this book, they were coming home. You've heard about this generation. They were coming home from school saying, like, why are we eating so much meat? Like,
Mm,
do you know how much good we can do, like, to individually? It's like the most important thing we can do to help combat climate change. Can
uh-huh.
we please eat less meat? And that's a big deal when you have your kids on board with that. It really
Yeah.
makes it easy, and it also is motivating. I've been trying to do that for so long. It just was in the atmosphere, like the Ottolenghi books were out, and vegetables were just like the superstar suddenly,
Yeah.
and so it was just at that moment, I just remember, I say this in the book, but I just texted my husband, Andy, who's also a cook, not by profession, but he likes to cook. And I just texted him, we need to eat less meat. Like, how do we do this? And we had done this thing with drinking, where we were just like kind of getting into this habit of like having a cocktail every night. And then we kind of had the same realization like a couple years before that, saying like maybe we should try to save that for the weekends and just make it like special. And
Mm-hmm.
we successfully did that. And so we just applied that same formula to meat. And so we just figured, we would try it. And it turned out it was a really smart way to do it, because it wasn't um, it wasn't so painful to just say goodbye to some of the meals that honestly, we really, they're sentimental dishes and
Mm-hmm.
recipes that are associated with my childhood, with my kids' childhood, with great grandparents. There's a lot of nostalgia. So
So do you make those on the weekends now, those dishes? Yeah.
yeah, we also, don't tell the gossip pages, but we also do it on the weekdays. But the point is, like,
Oh
most
wow, you're
the,
exposed in this podcast. Now this is gonna go viral. Great. Yeah. Okay.
but the point is, like, it's a guideline. And initially we were like Monday to Friday,
Yeah.
legit weekday vegetarians, and now it's just we are just plant based way more often than we're not. That's kind of
Yeah.
where we fell back on, because it's not like, we'll go to someone's house on a Tuesday and they're not, if they know we're not strict vegetarians, so if there's chicken or whatever, we're not going to not eat that. And we're happy to eat it, obviously, but yeah,
In
so
terms of like satisfaction, though, it's funny. I feel like my husband is very like a Wendy's commercial in the sense of like, where's the beef?
yeah.
But he doesn't say like, where's
He's
the
not
beef?
the only one.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's more like, where's the protein? Like to him, a dinner is not a dinner unless there's protein. So he likes tofu, he likes beans, like he likes all that stuff. But often, like if I'm coming home from the farmer's market and I just have like broccoli or I have tomatoes or corn, like if I don't have a protein ready to go, like he won't
Yeah.
think of it as dinner unless it's pasta, which he doesn't love. So it's tricky.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you, like, have you ever had pasta for dinner, or have
Oh
you
yeah, all the time. Oh my God,
has
I
he
make
ever had?
pasta. Yeah.
Yeah, but like pizza, does he like pizza?
Yeah,
Like to
he
me,
loves all that, but I feel
yeah,
like we live in LA where everyone's very like body conscious. Not that we are
yeah,
by any means,
right.
but like protein is like all the
Yeah.
rage when
I know.
you
And
want to look like.
when I was coming up with ideas for this book, those voices were in my head just because so many people when I announced the book were said some version of um please let this not be another vegetarian book where it's all just like you're compensating with cheese
Hmm.
and carbs. And I totally knew what they were, that was the big issue for me too.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so there, at the same time you're like cooking for kids, right? So you have to balance that with like these kids who are like growing teenagers who have sports and they're voracious, and they're not going to be content with just like like a tofu bowl with green beans. And it's like, I
Yeah.
mean, we would be. So it's like the book is addressing all of that. There's something kind of for everybody.
Hmm.
I mean, it's tricky. I'm not going to say this solves every problem, but it tried to address that very, very acutely.
Well, in terms of how you feel, I mean, I feel like when I eat more of a vegetarian diet, I feel lighter, I feel better. I feel like meat can be like really heavy in your system. So I'm curious,
Yeah.
like when you were writing this book and you were testing all these recipes, did it change how you felt physically?
I mean, people keep asking me that, and I'm not sure how to answer because, yes, like, of course, but I also kind of felt like, obviously, all foods are healthy in certain ways. I mean,
Sure.
as long as you like eat them in moderation, and um, yeah, I mean, I felt good there are recipes in this book that are like, there's like a mac and cheese in this that's it's made with chickpea pasta, so there's like
Yeah.
there's protein for your husband, and with like a chopped tomato salad. But like that's not the kind of meal that I'm gonna walk away feeling like virtuous about. But at the same time, like a lot of the reason why I wrote this book was so that I could work more vegetables into my diet, not
Mhm.
just not eat meat, but like actually really enjoy vegetables, and because I love vegetables. And so
Yeah.
when there's a whole section in this book called small plates night, not something I invented obviously, but it's like it really takes advantage of like that idea of like when you come home from the farmer's market with your tomatoes and whatever, and what you're not really sure what to do with it, what I just do is make a ton of little salads, and then there's like a section where you can like add a protein, whether that's lentils or eggs or tofu. Um, and when I eat like that, which is like pretty much from like spring through the fall when
Hmm.
vegetables are amazing, I feel great. Like I'm not as like, I don't have that like calling for like the really like rich comfort foods of fall.
Right.
So
You're constantly grazing a little bit, or you have little
kind
things.
of,
Yeah, that's really
yeah.
healthy. So, how do you think your cooking will change with the kids out of the home?
Oh my God. I'm so, this is 72 hours old. So ask me in a few
Wow.
weeks. But
We just
like,
watched a movie
yeah,
called Brad Status. I don't know if you've seen it with Ben
no,
Stiller, who's like
no.
taking his kid to college for the first time. It's really good. I'd check it
Wait,
out.
what's it called? Brad's
Brad
status?
Status. It's by Mike White, who just did The White Lotus.
Yeah, we're down a Mike White rabbit hole right now.
Yeah,
So,
so watch it.
uh-huh.
Nobody saw it, but it's really good. Anyway, it will
Okay.
resonate for you. But keep going. I want
Yeah.
to hear this. Yeah.
No, well, for starters, I've been writing about this a lot, but my kids do not like eggs, and I am an Olympic level egg lover. Like, I just don't know how these two girls came from me because I mean, I go through a whole carton on my own, and so I've never had them at my disposal for dinner. So there's a lot more eggs in the rotation now. That's one way I know things are going to change. Um, it's also, this is a bad thing. We're just fine. I mean, keep in mind we're only like 3 days into this, but since we're both kind of working from home, and there's not like the structure of the day, that was usually informed by their schedules and when they were coming and going and when we were going to eat and get them out the door and this. Now it's just like this blob of like, oh, we're just going to work all the time. And so we're both home sitting at the dining room table, and yesterday we were like, oh my God, it's dark. Like maybe we should probably make some dinner. So yeah, so that's we have to work on that. But I don't think it will be hard at all. But that was just something I noticed yesterday. It was funny.
Well, you seem like a perfect candidate right now in your life for lunch therapy, which we're about to begin. So
I
I will
can't wait.
ask you, Jenny, what did you
Mhm.
have for lunch today?
Oh man, I had leftover dinner from last night, which was like a basic crispy tofu that's like a dredged in cornstarch kind of tofu that you toss with like it was like a Vietnamese inspired sauce. It was like
Hmm.
from, Andrea Nguyen's book, Vietnamese Any Day. She has a great like little drizzle sauce that's like oyster sauce and soy sauce and fish sauce. It's just like kind of perfect for everything. So that with like vegetables that were left over, we yeah, so we had like, again, this is also something that's changing. Like we have to get used to the amounts that we're cooking. We're used to
Hmm.
cooking for two athletes, at the table, and now it's just us. So we had leftovers, which was very exciting. So that's what I had for lunch today.
Great. Well, I mean, the first thing I'm wondering about is the link between like cooking for work versus like cooking for yourself versus cooking for your kids, because you do so many things, and I'm wondering like how do you separate all those things out, or do they all sort of overlap?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. They kind of do all overlap. I don't really like, I never wake up and say, okay, today I have to develop 3 recipes, for one for the blog, one for the book, one for the newsletter. But, it's actually 100% informed by just how I go about my day cooking for my family. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, I think the reason why that works is because I'm just always like, just like any human, my tastes are always changing, and I'm very interested in food and food personalities and people. So I'm always following them and getting ideas. So I kind of always have new ideas. And
Hmm.
so, um, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but like pretty much it all kind of blurs together. Like the worst thing that happens is when I'll make something and realize it's original. That's like,
Hmm.
oh, this is probably something that I could run tomorrow in the newsletter. And then I have to like write it down after I've made it. And the worst is when I just can't quite get it right, and then I have to make it over again. I don't.
Okay.
That's like I really don't like doing that, but I do it if I just don't think it's right. But for the most part, I've kind of mastered the art of like the post mortem
Hmm.
recipe
That's
writing.
literally how I've always done it, because it's so authentic, because it's like you're not pretending to make something that you're not really that
Yeah.
enthusiastic about. Like you genuinely are making this and then telling people about it. So I
Yes.
totally get
Yes.
that. Yeah.
And also like like sometimes I get around the people who might be like a little um confused by like there are a lot of people who want exact measurements and exact
Hmm.
instructions, a lot of people. And so um I usually get around that by saying like a few glugs of olive oil,
Yes.
or whatever, which is not an exact measurement, of course, but yeah, I hope that satisfies them, but it seems to be working. So
Oh yeah, I do that. I do that too.
mhm.
And it's funny because I feel like people who don't like that don't trust themselves as cooks, and they want to be
Yeah,
able to blame a recipe. They want to be able to say, I didn't do anything wrong. I followed this recipe and it's too salty, as opposed to like, oh, I should have tasted this and should have
right,
adjusted, so
right.
I think that's about not wanting to take on the responsibility themselves. But
That's
that's,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like the elephant in the room here in terms of like the psychological element of your lunch is what you were
Mhm.
talking about your kids going away. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit
Mhm.
about being a food person and raising your children in a house with food. Like what were your attitudes about cooking as they grew up, and how did you deal with all of that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they really are really good eaters. They've gone in and out of phases. I have my believe it or not, my youngest, Abby, she was born underweight, and she had to be tube fed when she was little because she just wasn't gaining weight fast enough. She had, the diagnosis was failure to thrive, and we did a full workup on her, and she was tube fed, and it was kind of a um, obviously very stressful time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was determined that she was just like, she was metabolically, everything was working. Like when they fed her, she gained weight, so they were just like, you just need to get her to eat. That's what you have to do. She was
Mm-hmm.
like 18 months, and they just said she's just too interested in too many things like in the world. She just won't sit down, which is so funny because it is exactly sort of what she's like now. And
Mm-hmm.
it was a very funny diagnosis that we bring up all the time. But, fast forward 18 years, and she is the best eater in the house, and the best, just she was actually the engine behind this book. Like she just had so many ideas
Mm-hmm.
about how to make recipes good, and she would just come down stairs. Like she was also online for school all of last year in high school,
So
her senior year.
before they got into this whole like earth save the earth, like
Uh-huh,
eat
uh-huh.
vegetarian thing, like when they were younger kids and you were cooking, were they more into like comfort foods like mac and cheese and all that stuff? I mean, was that what you were making?
Yeah, well, I mean, I made that, but believe it or not, my older daughter Phoebe doesn't eat pasta, so there were not a lot of pastas in the rotation. It's a lot of chicken. I would say that it was like the thing we had the most were just like we would make like um this. I would put a fleet of chicken thighs on a baking sheet. Then stir some like mash some butter with mustard
Mm-hmm.
and oh god, it's been so long since I made this. And then you just like smear it on the chicken thighs and then press in breadcrumbs. And it's just like a classic like breaded
That
mustard
sounds
baked
good.
chicken.
I feel like,
It's so
yeah,
good.
I feel like
I-
Suzanne Goyen has something like that, and maybe one of her books, where it's like,
yeah,
yeah,
I
like
mean,
yeah, it's
I
so good.
didn't invent it at all.
No,
It's
no,
so
no, I know.
good.
I think I made it a long time ago. But wait, I was going to ask you. So, as your kids go off to college, are they carrying on your traditions, like in their new lives? Like, do they cook?
I'm so glad you asked that because Phoebe, who's she was last year a freshman in college, and she was lucky enough to be on campus, but everything was none of the classes were in person, so she was in her room taking classes, and in her room, like instead of being, she's a runner, so she was not really practicing. The season was canceled, so the only kind of way that she really connected was, or not the only way, but one of the ways that she could rely on um, connecting with people was family dinner, which she organized like just with a group of her friends. They just like decided every night they would have dinner together.
Oh,
And she was, I think she really, that just, you can imagine. I just like, my heart just like
oh, well,
blew
it's
up.
funny because I feel like that generation grew up with food as like a thing. And I feel
Yeah.
like when I grew up, food wasn't a thing. It wasn't like Food Network, Bon
No.
Appetit, all that stuff. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't around. I mean, it was around, but like nobody was watching it. So I feel like this newer
Yeah.
generation is like spoiled by all of this amazing food content out there,
Oh
especially
my
the one
God.
their mother was
There's
making. Yeah.
Yeah, they're so used to it. It's crazy. Like my daughter, what I was about to tell you before was that my daughter who was at home would come downstairs every day during high school classes, like at 11:49, like on the dot, and she would just say, like, "I'm gonna make an elaborate lunch now," like, or it would be like, "Can you make me an elaborate lunch?" Like she was just very into the whole like big like European pasta like big lunch thing, and then she would
Love
just like
that.
pass out for the rest of the afternoon. But
Did you
but
guys weigh in on each other's food? Like, would your kids give you feedback on the food you were making for your work and stuff? And would
yeah,
they
yeah,
get
all the
your
time.
feedback too? And how did that go?
I mean, mostly it went okay, but it was tough with this book, I will say in the beginning, because they really didn't, as I said, they don't like eggs. One of them doesn't like pasta. They were very reluctant to embrace tofu. Um, and so I had to, it was kind of a bumpy road, but they eventually like came around to tofu, which is good. The key, of course, is to like fry it, but
Mm-hmm.
that's fine. I'll take it. And then yeah, and then they loved like the big breakthrough was chickpeas. Like once we learned how to again fry it, like just to make them really crispy, and then add like smoked paprika and
Mm-hmm.
cayenne and garlic salt or whatever. Just make them like really flavorful and spicy. That was like kind of our new chicken, where we just like added it to salads and like put it in tacos. And um there's a chickpea Caesar salad recipe in the book that's Abby's
That
favorite.
looks really good.
Yeah,
I saw that. Yeah, I
it's
love that.
really good. It's
So
good.
I was going to ask you about your lunch. I mean, I feel like I'm fixating on your children. So let's go back to you for a second.
Please, please, please.
But you talked about being so busy and being at the table. And I'm curious, like, have you always been a busy person? Like, have you always been keeping yourself busy
No,
with all the projects?
I
And
mean, yes, yes, yes. But like, I'm also, I would say this like stretch here, I'm busier than usual just because my book just came out. So
yeah,
there's just a lot of, like just maintenance with that. For the most part, I don't really work past 3 o'clock just because I don't know. I think it's because I'm so used to just like, I was so used to for so long, just like picking up the girls at the school bus or at
mm-hmm.
school. So my brain just like shut off. But yeah, from like 8:30 to that point, like I'm, 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 I'm doing work. I'm usually just sitting in one place staring at my computer, but, or in the kitchen, like working on something. But yeah, yeah, I'm not crazy busy. I'm not overwhelmed. Like it's
Right.
not, it used to be that way when I first started, like, because I had no boundaries and I just wanted to work all the time. And like right now I feel that way just because it's exciting and I'm running on adrenaline because of the book.
Yeah.
And but like, no, for the most part, I'm kind of lazy. So
Well, I'm curious for those who are your fans of yours. I mean, can you walk us through a typical day of, you know, dinner, a love story, and how you do
sure.
all the things that you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's really gonna be the most boring, like, 30 seconds of your life here,
I
but,
don't think so.
I mean, I am pretty regimented, I will say, like, I almost always I mean, like, I'll run in the morning, like, for exercise, and, I mean, you're gonna think I'm really crazy, but, like, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and, like, usually one day of the weekend I'll run, and then because on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I have this online gym class that I do at noon. So, like, my whole kind of day is informed around those 2 things, and I
That's
don't wanna
not
say that
crazy. That's
I don't do
healthy.
yeah, it's healthy, but I'm not gonna say I do that every single week, but for the most part,
Right.
I would say of those 6 days exercising, I'm never less than 4 days
Mhm.
exercising, but
That's
that's like
great.
the general framework
The
of
pandemic ruined me for exercise because I was going to a gym. I was so good about it, but then I got nervous with COVID and breakthrough COVID, and I didn't like wearing a mask, so I just canceled my membership, and I'm just letting myself go.
No, you know what? You should join my online gym class. I'm not kidding. It's
Okay.
amazing, and
What's it called?
it's all online. It was the gym I went to
Oh, okay.
before
We'll talk
the
about it later. I don't want
pandemic.
people like stalking you on your online gym class. But
I'm totally sending you that information though. It's really fun.
great. Okay.
I mean, it's not fun. It's awful, but it's good. It's good to do it. But anyway, okay. So that like it depends whatever day of the week you know um, it is based on my exercising. Like I'll always have coffee. Like, and I don't make my own coffee usually. I usually like to go out to just a local coffee shop just because it's just staring at my computer at home so much that I just really will use any excuse to get myself out.
Now, just to
And then
ask, I don't mean to interrupt the flow, but when you talked a lot about like staring at your computer, being at your computer, but
yeah,
is this all food writing that you're doing at your computer?
yeah, for the most part. I mean, I
Okay.
write about other things too, but no, I would say 80% of it, 90% of it is food writing.
So you're like working the
Um,
language, or you're working. I mean, just imagine. I'm trying to get into like
I
the
have like okay, so again, I'm very routinized. Like Mondays, my newsletter goes out.
right.
Thursday, my newsletter goes out.
Same
Wednesday,
here.
yes, go Substack.
Exactly the same. Yeah.
And then Wednesday, I have a column in Cup of Joe, a food
Uh-huh.
column. So she's like, that's just so fun to work on. And then I always have some like freelance assignments on top of that. So I have to kind of balance that out. And I'm like the worst procrastinator. So when I say I'm staring at my screen working, like it's not even like, like I have a 750 word story due like 3 days ago. And I've just been like, checking my Instagram and like
Yes.
I call that working, but it's staring at a
You and
screen.
I are kindred spirits. I don't have 3 children, but I do like cook the way you do. I do my Substack the way you do, and I
Aw,
go through my life the way that you do, except for the
I'm so
exercise too.
flattered.
Yeah, it's all
No, I'm
we're
gonna get you. I'm gonna hook you into that. So
we're
we'll be
living parallel lives.
yeah.
Okay, so you work at your
Mhm,
computer, and then what
mhm.
happens?
The other thing is 1 or 2 times a week I go to my work share space, which is
Hmm.
where I'm recording this interview from, and that's really great because it's like a local network. I live in a small town surrounded by other small towns, and where it's right on the Hudson River, and like it's just like the office space is gorgeous, and just like so many people coming in and out, and it's just fun. I don't even really need to be here, but I just like the interactions
Hmm.
with people. I miss that so much from when I was working full time, like at a magazine. And I miss that, working with Cup of Joe, that website I was just telling you about. I used to go
Hmm.
to Brooklyn
Yeah.
to work on that. And so that I'm not doing that anymore. So I love that. It's really more for my mental health than anything else.
Oh yeah, we're exactly in the same boat. I mean, I used to go to a coffee shop all the time to write, and
Yeah.
COVID kind of took that out of me because I guess I don't need all that like $7 coffee like every day. So it's sort of just like
Yeah.
I guess I could work from home. So I've just been home with my dog and my husband in the back room, even though we can go out now and wear our masks. It's just I
It's
don't feel that.
hard to get
Yeah,
back into that, like to that. It's hard to exercise those muscles again after like not using them for so long. I
but it's
mean,
healthy to
yeah,
get into be in the world. So I think that's great that you're doing that.
yeah.
So
No,
when
but
does the
like, yeah.
yeah? Oh, I was gonna say when does the cooking start?
The cooking starts usually at like 6:30, six
Got it.
forty-five. I mean, we're so good at like making fast dinners now that like we came home from the airport after dropping off my daughter in college. I always like look at the clock. I'm like, oh, it's 7:23, and we were literally eating at 7:41. Like, and a
Wow.
good dinner too. It was like so. It
What
was
was it? What did you make when you dropped your daughter off at college? What was the meal?
well, she was gone. So it was just the two of us on our first night home. There's like there's this one person on Instagram or someone who reads my newsletter. I can't remember. She said you would love the Ottolenghi like charred tomato recipe. It's like a absolute like crowd pleaser at every party I make it. And it was like it's roasted charred cherry tomatoes with freezing cold yogurt like underneath it. And
Yeah.
the way and the roasted tomatoes, they have like brown sugar and oregano and cumin seeds, which is like that's kind of like the magic ingredient somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But then I added chickpeas to the other side of the baking dish this time. So I had chickpeas and the tomatoes, and I put that on yogurt. And I blasted it because the other thing is I have this great new smart oven, so I can turn the oven on. So I was like coming home from the airport, and so it was at like 4:50 before I even walked in the door.
Wait, from
So,
your phone, you could turn your oven on?
yes,
Wow, that's
it's
crazy.
amazing. Yes, it's called like you're not going to ask me the brand, and I think it's a GE. I mean, I think they all kind of have them. They're the smart ovens or whatever. But
That's
yeah,
crazy.
I'm not a gadget person at all, but that I love. So
It's funny because
yeah.
I wouldn't have thought of like, why is that useful? But then it's like, oh yeah, you're coming home, you need to preheat your oven. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
It's like, I mean, that's like, it would have taken me that long to preheat my oven,
Mm-hmm.
like as long as it took for me to cook it,
So how do your husband, because you said your husband cooks too, so how do you negotiate like who gets to choose the meal, like who's in charge, who's not in charge, or is it always a collaboration?
It's kind of, I don't even, I don't know. I don't know how it works, but we've been married for so long and we've known each other for so long that it's just like, we don't even have to discuss it. It's just like, there are certain things that like, I know, like last night with the tofu, that breaded tofu, he's like, or not bread, crispy. It's like dredged in cornstarch, that
Mm-hmm.
tofu, to make it crispy. He's like mastered this like frying technique, whereas I'm just so impatient. I do it like quickly, and he needs like if it's tofu, he needs it to be like perfect. So
Uh-huh.
I let him do that, which is fine. And we used to have this rule that was like, if you make it, you own it. Like if you discover a recipe and it's like really good and then it's you own it for the rest of your life. Like you have to make it. So we definitely have like a whole lineup of those. But yeah, for the most part, like when we were eating meat most of the time, he was like, just like, sorry to be so stereotypical, but he was like the guy making the meat, and I was
Mm-hmm.
usually making all the salads, and not always, but most of the time. So.
Well, it makes me think of that. Have you ever seen Big Night, the movie Big Night?
Yeah, I love that movie.
Like the end of that movie where it's like Tony Shalhoub and Stanley
Mm.
Tucci are just in the kitchen and like they make an omelet, but it's all silent. It's like one of them gets the
Oh,
eggs and like one of them gets the pan and one of them starts melting the butter. And it's just trying to show that their relationship is just, they don't even need to talk anyway. So it makes me think of that.
that
Although,
makes me good. I'm gonna have to rewatch that scene. That's so sweet. Yeah, forgot about that.
what we haven't done yet with you, which is like classic therapy technique, is like, swish back to your childhood and growing up and what kind of food did you eat as a kid? Where did you grow up? What was that like?
Oh man, I grew up not far from where I live now, in Westchester. I grew up in Larchmont, New York,
Okay.
which is north of New York on the Long Island Sound. My parents are still there. My sister's still there. My twin brother, he's in the city, but so we're all like right here. But yeah, we grew up like my mom is a lawyer. She went to law school when I was in fourth grade and
Wow.
like worked like became partner at her own firm by like the time I was in 10th grade. She's still working today. She's 85 years old. She'll be so mad
As
that
a
I
lawyer?
said that. Yeah,
Really?
as a lawyer, she's incredible. She works way harder than me. Like it's crazy.
What kind of
And
law does she do?
just like real estate and wills. Yeah, she's the opposite of me. She has so much like patience and um she can just like power through like a 500-page document like single spaced with like all that legalese like it's a John Grisham novel. It's crazy. But she's
Did she want you to be a lawyer when you were growing up?
no, I don't think so. She didn't, they didn't like, my parents didn't do that. They weren't like, I
Ugh.
think you could, like, my mom was kind of like, you would be a great eye surgeon because you're so good with your hands, like things like
Yeah.
that, but like nothing for real. Like she
My
was
parents pushed me, and I did go to law school, and I got a law degree that I never used, but that's where I learned how to cook, and that's why I started my food blog. So it all
wait,
worked out.
why did you learn how to cook when you were in law? Just because you had to learn to cook for yourself, you mean?
Yes, but also I was miserable. Like I hated law school. It was just like, this is not for me, and I just was like, I need
Yeah.
to do something. Like
creative.
get out of this. Like, so I just was in the kitchen and like started like cooking tomato sauce and like smelling it and like tasting it. And I was like, this is what I want to do. So yeah, I took
Isn't
that.
that
So,
funny though, that like now, like back then I remember having that sort of epiphany, like when I was working in finance,
mhm.
and like someone asked me like, well, if you could do anything, I was saying like that I was so miserable, and they were like, well, if you could do anything, like what would you want to do? And I was like, I remember thinking like I want to do something with food,
Mm,
but I was like too embarrassed to say it because it just felt like who's like makes a career in food? Like it was so not a thing back then.
yeah.
And now I feel like I get so many emails from people in like good colleges, like saying,
Oh
"How do you
yeah.
break into that world?" Like it's so nice to see, and it's
So where
so
did that interest come from though? Like where did it start for you?
um. I've always just loved to eat. I think that's kind of it. My mom, she's 100% Italian, but she cooked dinner every single night, even like through law school, and every night that she worked. But she wasn't like she was a shortcut cook. Like she just like used, even though she's 100% Italian, she would use like the meatball tenderizer mix from like
Hmm.
from whatever aisle, I don't even know where it is. But and so she wasn't like um she was a very 80s cook. She just
Yeah.
loved like shortcut cooking. And so I kind of learned when I moved in with my husband, and we just had to cook for ourselves, and then I got a job at a magazine at Real Simple. Like that was my first big magazine job,
Got it.
and they needed like a word person in the food department, and I was like, I like food, I can do that. And so yeah, that's kind of where I just learned. And there were like the food people in the food department were not to be confused with me. It was like the word person. And so
Right.
I always was like, I can't do that, but I can write about it. Like I can't develop a recipe, but I can write about it. And then, the more I was around that department, the more I realized like, oh, I could actually do this. It's not that hard. And I love it. And then I just like once I started writing about it, it just felt right. Like, I don't know,
Hmm.
I'm sure you felt the same way, but like I just remember like, I had the same kind of job at the next magazine I was at, and I would wake up in the middle of the night and like just think about the story I was editing and I couldn't wait to get to work on it. And it was like the first time that had ever happened to me,
Hmm.
and so I just kind of knew that that's what I wanted to do somehow. But I did not imagine any of this would happen. But
Well, how did you? I'm curious because like the words part of it and the food
mm,
part of it, I feel like you have a style in both your language and how you write about food, and also that your food itself has a style. And they
uh,
both, well, they have a voice to them that I think that's what you have to have. Honestly, like it's like when people write you or write me, and they were like, "How do I break into food?" It's like, well,
yeah,
it helps to have a singular voice, but it's not something you can choose to
yeah,
have. But I'm curious,
right.
how do you think you developed your individual style as a cook and as a writer?
I mean, I think in my magazine training helped a lot
Mhm.
because just as I was saying, like I wasn't the one coming up with the, like quick chicken recipes, but I was the one who was saying like, you know what, like we need all these busy moms like need quick weeknight recipes. And so
Mhm.
like I would come up with the idea like for some package, like let's hear from this mom and what she makes, and let's have a tip from this chef who's also a mom. And like, so I would like have to kind of think about the story from all these different angles. And
Mhm.
I don't know if you've ever worked in magazines, but like packaging was like a big thing, like how you make
Right.
these packages. And like I loved working on packages, whether it was like food or travel or whatever. And I think that really trained my brain to kind of think in a certain way. So maybe when you were so nice to say that I was like up to speed right away, like with the blogging, it felt like I had so much training just like as a writer
Uh-huh.
already that it didn't, even though as I said, I can hardly read those without cringing, but like I had a confidence about it, like about idea generating. I think that was half the battle. So
So how old were your kids when you started your blog? Were they all around at that time?
6 and 8.
6 and 8. So I'm curious, like in terms of, because I feel when I think about your blog and I think about your newsletter, I feel like there's snippets of your life, like you're sharing things about like what's going on, but
Hmm.
it's also like I'm sure, and I've done this too. It's like you have your boundaries of how
Yeah,
much you're sharing. But I'm curious, as a mother, how did you handle that all through the years as your kids were growing up, and you wrote about like them,
yeah. I mean,
perhaps?
when they were little, I thought about it a lot, and it was Deb Perlman who I read in an interview once, like who was asked that same question, and she said, "You can write a lot without writing everything,"
Hmm.
And I always think about that. It was such a good way to model my writing on. Like I basically in the beginning I never really showed their faces. I would always kind of cut it off at like the mouth or whatever, or to show their hands or their dresses or whatever, or their soccer uniforms, just to give it like that context of family. But I wouldn't just like do a full on. I don't know why. It was like because we all have our weird lines in the sand, but that made me feel better for whatever reason. And then and yeah, like I wrote about them. I wrote like little stories, but I just didn't like, there were certain things like that feeding tube story that I just told you.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't write about that because I just felt like I wasn't sure, would Abby want me to tell that story? I
Mm-hmm.
felt like maybe that's a story she would want to tell someday. I don't know. I just didn't feel like, I just felt like that crossed the line. There were certain personal things that crossed the line. And that gets you in trouble because like what ends up happening is like people would always say to me like, oh my God, you have this like perfect life. Like everything is so great. And it's because like a lot of the stuff that's hard that you're dealing with, you don't feel comfortable sharing with complete strangers. And so
Mm-hmm.
I would from time to time kind of try to say that to people, but it never really, there's still people who are like, you're struggling with that? Like, tell me more about that. Like, I don't know what that looks like. Tell me, it's like, I mean, I'm a mother, like obviously like there's a lot of problems all the time in my house, but anyways, I can't remember. I'm going
No,
there,
that
but
really resonates for
uh-huh.
me too, because it's like, Craig and I have been together for 15 years and we had our wedding and I put it on my blog, like pictures of our wedding. And it's like,
Yeah.
in a similar way, it's like, I'm not writing on my blog about like huge fights that we have or like, he
Yeah,
jumps out of a
right?
moving car and runs down the street. Not that that's happened, but we
Some
did
people
have,
do, and I
yeah,
appreciate it,
yeah.
like, I think you want that because it's honest,
Yeah,
obviously.
I mean, I'll write about our fights, but like when it gets, there's certain things though that I don't write about, and it's a similar thing to you. It's like you choose those boundaries. But I'm curious for you
Yeah.
because it's like with Craig, like he's aware mostly of like what I'm doing. Like if I'm like I'm gonna write about blah 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 blah, he's like okay great. But like
Yeah.
with your kids when they were too young to know, like
Yeah.
at what point did they become cognizant of your blog and what you were
I'll
doing?
I'll tell you the exact moment was when I became verified on Instagram because then they were like, "You have a blue check," and like it was like the best thing that I could ever have as a mother of teenagers. And then suddenly they were like, "Tag me on Instagram. I want your followers."
That's
So
hilarious.
I didn't do that. Don't worry. But yeah, we did cross over to a point where I basically just said, um, I would make if I was writing about them in any kind of a personal way. Like there's two chapters in the last book that I wrote that were like kind of essays about their personalities, which was the first time that I'd ever done that. And I made them read it just to make sure they were okay. And then I would always ask them to read things that I was putting on the blog. Even just like the stuff that was kind of harmless. You never know. Cause like, especially with just teenagers, like you just don't know what's gonna trigger them. And I just wanted to be on the safe side. So
And have they started writing on like their Instagrams about food? Like are any of them
yeah.
like doing like the same thing that you do?
Um, Abby, the one who would like make the elaborate lunches, she doesn't really post on Instagram, but she has a very robust Visco feed. Do you know what Visco is?
I'm too old to know what that is. No.
It's just basically Instagram, but with like filters and no captions, and people can't comment. So it's this like very aesthetic thing. All the like most teenage girls like have you would start noticing it in people's like Instagram profiles. It's like kind of more of an unfiltered. Anyway, I'm going off track here, but
No, no.
she
I'm
has
gonna download it when we're done so I can be cooler and younger. Yeah.
I'm sure like as I say this, it's probably like not even like cool anymore. But yeah, Abby would post a lot of her lunches on that, which was kind of fun. And sometimes she'll post things on her stories, but no, it never makes the grid, I don't think, not the food. But
But what was I going to ask you? Oh yeah, your father. So we talked about your mother. She's
mhm,
amazing. She's a lawyer, and you
mhm.
mentioned your father. So was he into food? Was he a cook? Was he into restaurants?
No, but he's an unbelievably enthusiastic eater. He's like a great like he grew up in the Bronx, like in a very Jewish family,
Mm-hmm.
and just really loved like the rituals around food, and um loves beautiful breads and babka and dessert. And he's just like your classic like New Yorker. Um he's the one who kind of taught me like wherever he goes he has a little, I'm sure you're like this too, but he has like like a food destination in every corner of the world. So
Mm-hmm.
he'll be like, oh, like we're in Grand Central, let's get those marzipan chocolates. Like, oh, we're downtown, let's get that baklava from that Middle Eastern market. Or he just like has these little touch points all over his world. It's funny. And
Have you
I'm
ever have
exactly
you
like that.
written about that or like done a post about like all his places? I feel like I would read that and be excited.
That's interesting. And I think I have like sort of here and there. And I don't think I've fully dedicated an essay to that topic,
Yeah.
but yeah, I should. You're right.
Well, it's
He's
funny. So like you have Jewish and you have Italian, and it's funny because those two cultures. I'm Jewish, but like
mhm,
I think there's a real like kinship between those two cultures in
yeah,
terms of like food and like larger than life personalities and stuff.
totally.
But in terms of like the influence on you, do you feel in the kitchen that
Hmm.
you're more of an Italian cook, that you're more of a Jewish cook, or is it just a mix of the two, or
I don't know. I wish that I was one or the other. Like that's always my regret that I don't have like a real cultural. I mean, I guess I would if I had to pick one, I would pick Italian. Like I
mm-hmm.
mean, I can cook almost like everything, but I'm following like Marcella Hazan's Italian cookbook, like not my mom's like great grandmother's tomato sauce, but
Right?
so it's weird. Like I might as I don't know if that's necessarily me being Italian or me just, knowing what authentic Italian cuisine is, but
I think there's some like crossover, like in terms. I just think of like sweet and sour flavors and certain like cabbage, like stuffed cabbage. I feel like I've
yeah,
seen like Lydia Bastianich make that with like pork, but like in
yep, yep.
obviously in Jewish culture you have that. So I feel like yeah, there's and obviously there's Jewish Italians too. So
Yeah,
anyway,
we
I'm
call
getting off
them
topic. Yeah. Wait,
we
what do
call
you call
them
them?
pizza bagels in our house. I'm a pizza bagel. There are a lot of pizza bagels around if you just start asking. It's funny.
Pizza big. That's really funny. That's like I
Yeah.
heard like a Catholic Jewish person is a cashew.
It took me a second. That's
Yeah.
funny.
But wait, I did. So I meant to ask you earlier about meeting your husband. You
Mhm.
mentioned that, but how did you guys meet each other?
We met in college in 1993.
Okay.
Yeah, we were just like, it was a small college and everyone knew everyone. And
Where did you go to college?
Amherst College
Oh,
in
great. Okay.
Western Massachusetts. Yeah, small. And we met, I was a senior. He was
Oop, you froze.
just, I don't even, oh,
Now you're back. You're back. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, we just met. I don't even remember like the moment when we met. We just were sort of always aware of each other. But yeah, we started dating officially like in my senior year, right in the beginning.
And then in terms of the food of it all, like, and you
Mhm.
mentioned that like gradually, like you started cooking, but like when you started dating, was food important right away?
Yes. We both love to go out to dinner on our limited student budgets, but there was one place in a town called Belchertown near Amherst that was I don't think it's still there. It was called Seasons and they had the best brunch. And we used to like just put that on the calendar for like weeks out and be like, we're gonna go to Seasons. And like if parents were in town, they would take us to Seasons. And we actually took pictures of our food in like which is so funny to me now. Like the pictures I still have them. They're so bad, but just the idea, like back then, people thought that was so crazy that we would take pictures of our food. Little did I know that was what I would be doing for the rest of my life.
Did your kids wonder about it when they were growing up, if you would take pictures of food? Like, did they think that was weird, or did they just think that was just normal life?
um, you would have to ask them. I think they probably. I mean, there were definitely times when they were like, "Just can we eat dinner?" Like when I had to like get the shot or whatever.
Mhm.
But no, I think they were probably just used to it at a certain point.
Well, I'm going to let you off the hook now psychologically for a second because I feel like I've been really probing. You've been a
That
good
was
sport.
easy. I like
Oh,
that.
really? Oh, you liked it? I mean, I want to ask you a little bit more about your process because we
Uh-huh.
talked about like your day-to-day life, but I'm sitting here with this gorgeous cookbook, a number
Mhm.
3 New York Times bestseller, and I'm wondering, like, can you talk to us about your process of writing a cookbook? Because you've written a few, and I'm curious how you go about it.
Yeah, I mean, they've all been a little bit different, but this one, I mean, my first book was Dinner Love Story, which was it followed the I've been keeping a dinner diary since 1998 where I write down every single dinner that I eat. And so by the time I wrote Dinner Love Story, it was 2010. I had been doing it for like 12 years. And so that was the easiest cookbook I'd ever planned because I was like, which recipes are coming up over and over? Which ones
Mm-hmm.
am I having success with? And how do I adapt them so that they're, so that they're easier or they're more updated or fresh or whatever. And then I wrote that book like a diary. So it was like just going through the different phases of my life as a cook, when I was just first married and then when we had kids and then or like to the 2 phases of having kids like babies when you just like everything just blows up and then normal like 6 and 8-year-olds who can sit at a table and have a conversation. So
Mm-hmm.
that was really easy to write because like I just had the outline before I, just instantly.
And coming
Um,
from the magazine world, I mean, did you have a sense of how you wanted it to be designed and what you wanted it to look like when you wrote that first book?
um, Strangely, no. I don't know why. I was much more concerned about the writing than the design. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it was, and then also like I thought it was interesting that the person who ended up, the editor who acquired the book, her name is Lee Boudreau. She's an amazing fiction editor, and she's known for her novels, and she's I love her to death. But she was not a cookbook editor, and so like we just focused so much on the stories and the words, and it's why that book is like my favorite because it's so much of my heart is in it, and the food is like, oh, okay, like yeah, you can make that like pork ragu, that's fine, but like here's the real story behind the pork
Yeah.
ragu. Like it, so it felt like the food was like kind of secondary, which worked for that. But then I think like for a book like this that I just came out with, like it was a completely different process and goal, like which is like when I signed up, when I pitched this book, I wasn't actually 100% sure that I could do it, like because it was the beginning of my experimental phase, and I was like, my kids don't eat eggs, like they're
Mm-hmm.
barely touching tofu. I don't think I can do this. And so in that way, it was like, but it worked in its own way because it was like I learned so much about working through those issues, and it's kind of like a book in real time. Um, and I just, there's nothing like figuring it out on the fly. And it's just now, of course, like as soon as I pressed like send on the manuscript, I have like all these new recipes that I'm like, oh, I should have put that in that.
That'll be the
So
next book, the sequel.
yeah, we'll see.
I'm
Yeah,
curious
so
as a writer, because like you talked about, I mean, as you're talking and as I'm learning more about you, I really do get a sense that writing is the anchor for you. I mean, that's what you're passionate about food and you love
mhm.
cooking and food, but writing really feels like what your true passion is, or your true art is, I guess, in a way, like that the language of it, or I mean, even the way you started
Yeah.
your career was the words, like, doing the
Yeah,
words.
yeah.
So
I mean, but like I'm sure you would agree with me that like I love writing, but I also detest it. Like it's like
yeah.
torture for me, and I can't believe that I do it for a living just based on how much I put it off and
I
procrastinate. But
was gonna,
yeah, I
yeah.
mean, yeah, I don't know. I feel like it took me a long time. Like in college, I was an English major, and I was like taught to write in a certain very academic way. And then I spent like the next like 10 years kind of unlearning that in magazines, because magazines were all about just like this flow and conversational tone. And again, like I kind of feel like magazines they trained me well for this kind of writing, service writing.
And I'm curious, like for me, because I love to write too, and I think we're similar in that way. One of the frustrating things, I wrote a cookbook and I wrote all these head notes, and it was hard for me to think like I spent so much time writing these head notes and then like literally labored over them. And there's a very good chance like 80% of the people who read this book will flip through it and like maybe read like just a
I
couple of
don't
them.
think so.
Oh,
I
you
don't
don't
think
think
so.
so?
I
You
feel,
think
I
they
feel
really
like
read it?
I think if they're buying a book, they want your perspective. Like as you
Mm-hmm.
were saying before, like if they want a recipe, they can just Google the recipe online, But if they want one person's perspective on how he
True.
cooks, then I think those head notes, like especially just like with this book, I meant to say that I have a different publisher and a different editor with this book, Raquel Pelzel at Clarkson Potter, who's just like a cookbook master. Like she just knows how to make a cookbook, and so she was just a totally different experience than working with Lee, and they were both wonderful in their own ways, they and so it's just a totally
Mm-hmm.
different. She was like, she made me work so hard on those head notes, because like I was just used to being like, oh, this is like my kids, we went to Chipotle and we love these smoked beans. And she's like, no, no, no. I want like the technique. I want, like you have to tell me like, what is it? What are the smells to make the reader know that this is done or that this is cooked, or like, what should you be, what visual cues should you be looking for? Like she just came at it from a totally like
More
culinary professional.
practical, it sounds like.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it makes such a difference, like the way you read a recipe. Like I just, just like what we were talking about before, like I'm just like, well, a couple glugs of this and that. And she was just like really, she made me like just very disciplined about it, which I think makes, a huge difference. This is a real cookbook.
But to make an argument for the other way too, like I do feel the recipes that I love the most are the ones that have great stories around them.
Yeah.
Something like like one of my favorite recipes of all time is from Amanda Hesser's book, Cooking for Mr. Latte, and
Yeah.
it's her mother-in-law's almond cake.
Yeah.
And it's just like sour cream and almond paste and stuff. And it's like if I had just read that online, to your point, like I would have just been like, okay, that looks fine. But like having
Right.
read it in that book and then having made it so
Yeah.
much in my life and written about it, like I feel like it takes on so much more
Yeah.
meaning
20
too.
years later, you're still talking about it,
Yeah.
like it's amazing. Yeah, wait, I was just going to tell you something. I lost my train of thought.
Okay. So is there like a recipe in all of your work, or like certain recipes that you feel like are your signature recipes, or the ones you want to be remembered for?
I mean, right now, the answer to that question is they're all like meat based, which is funny. I think the most
Sure.
famous recipe that we've ever, I say we because it was really my husband who came up with it, was the pork ragu, where he wrote a post. This is back when he used to guest post for me on Dinner, I
Mhm.
Love Story. It was the greatest. And he called it Instant Dinner Party. And it was about how we used to entertain when the kids were little. Like we would just braise a pork shoulder all day, and then it
Mhm.
would just like melt off the bone and you add tomatoes, and it's this unbelievable easy flavorful sauce. And then when the guests arrive, you just make the pasta, and it's just like all very easy and make ahead and memorably delicious. And so it just somehow took off, I think, because I also kind of made it the star of Dinner, a Love Story. Like it had a big centerfold, and it was like I just referred to it so many times that I think the marketing of the dish was like really good.
Yeah.
So that's like, it's by far like my most popular recipe, I would say. But like what I would like to be remembered for is it's such a hard question. I don't know. Like, do you know what that is for you? Is that
No,
like
not at
the
all. And I mean, as I ask it, I realize it's not so much about a recipe as it is like the work and like
yeah.
getting people excited about food and like just getting people into the kitchen. Like I know it's about sharing that enthusiasm, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. Oh, I know
But
what I was going to say to you before.
yeah,
Sorry. This
what?
is sort of related, but like just about like perspective and head notes and your stories. Like, don't you feel like every couple months someone is on Twitter saying like, okay, food bloggers, enough with this story, and we don't need to hear all your memories of your grandparents in
Yes.
France, and like and then like everyone is like chiming in like, amen, like what are they doing? And then there's always like the food blogger like
Uh-huh.
who comes in and is like saying what I would just told you about perspective. And it's so funny. So like I don't know what the answer is, like who wants what and I think
I
they're
I
like
have like some thoughts about that because I think when I was, because I'm working on a book right now, and like when I was as I've been researching it, I'll Google like chocolate chip cookie recipe or something just to read what's out there. And I
yeah,
think a lot of like second or third generation food bloggers kind of fill the front matter of their posts with like meaningless copy. Like it's like
yeah,
they're trying to mimic like what the older generation of food bloggers was doing. And so I actually advocate skipping those head notes
yeah,
because it's like this
yeah,
person
yeah,
isn't even writing. But if you're a great writer like you are, or Deb or David Leibovitz or any of these people, absolutely, it's like you're robbing yourself not to read this great essay that puts it in
yeah.
context. So that's
I
my
agree.
thought about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jenny, we're not quite at the end yet. We're almost there. And I start every podcast by asking, "What did you have for lunch?" But I end every podcast by asking, "What are you having for dinner tonight?"
Oh my God. I don't actually know yet. Do you believe that? I think it's gonna be something with eggs, believe it or
Okay.
not. There's a recipe in this book for migas tacos that's like
Mhm.
we tried to replicate them from this place, like this amazing place in Austin.
What's that place called? I
That
feel
was
like I've been there.
Veracruz,
Okay,
I
I haven't
think.
been there. I've been
Was
somewhere
it?
in Austin for
Yeah.
amazing migas, so that's where I
Um,
first had it.
Yeah, I don't even know why is Mika so good? It's like it's just adding like corn tortillas like crushed to eggs and then with jalapenos. And yet somehow it's just like it makes, I could eat scrambled eggs every day of my life, but for dinner I just feel like I should excuse me, I should just kind of up my game a little bit. And
Mhm.
somehow that if you put it in a corn tortilla with um, like a fresh salsa and some avocados. It's so good. And we did it like a month ago when both the girls were out because they eggs. And we were like, we're gonna make this all the time when they leave. And so tonight I was thinking, I think I have everything I need for that. So I'll probably do that. And that takes so little time. I mean, like all the recipes in this book, but that one really doesn't take a
That
lot of time.
sounds
So
delicious. So I'm curious, like with your kids and eggs, like was there a period where you tried to get them into eggs and they just
yeah.
resisted?
Yeah. My older one, Phoebe, she'll tolerate an egg now. Like I don't want to be too dramatic about it, but like she'll eat a frittata if it's potato heavy and she's
Mhm.
starving, but like she will never ask for it or like recommend it. If someone's like, what should we have for dinner? They'd neither of them, whatever. And my other one is just like, she can't even be in the same house when I'm like hard boiling an egg. It's so
Because it
ridiculous.
smells. Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
can see that. It's also like, I could also imagine it's a texture thing, like soft
Yeah.
scrambled eggs. I'm
Yeah.
sure
I get it.
yeah, it can be
Yeah.
kind of snotty and gross.
Yeah.
My other
Sure.
question for you, we're almost done. Don't worry, you're almost out of
I'm
here.
fine. I'm having a great time.
Okay, good, good, good.
Uh-huh.
I was going to ask you about shopping, you know, because you just mentioned like you have that stuff to make miga. So when you go
Mhm.
food shopping, do you do like one big trip to the grocery store? Do you do lots of trips like throughout the week? What does it look like for
It
you?
used to be one big shop, and now it's a lot of little ones. Just because we're home all the time, so it's just so easy to pop out. Like before, I just felt like organization was so key to making this whole thing work, and like because I would come home from work at like or just not like super late, but I wouldn't be able to just like pop out and I wouldn't think about dinner for starters. Like all now I do all day. I just think about dinner, like
Mhm.
starting from like 10 o'clock. I'm like, what should we do? And then like it's a constant conversation, and so yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think it's important to shop for food, just like do a big shop and be covered. But
Mhm.
I think also just like with the kids leaving, that's another thing that's just gonna kind of go out the window, because like we don't have to just always have just like mountains of food for them to inhale.
Well, it makes
So
me think about like living, like eating for your or cooking for yourself versus cooking for your family. Because I mean, I've talked about this on the podcast before. Like, when my husband goes out of town for work, my cooking changes completely. Like I'll cook something that he would like rice and beans, for example. Like I
yeah,
love making delicious rice and beans for dinner, and he'll eat it, but it's not like his favorite. So like
yeah,
if he's gone, I'll make that. But I think for you and your husband, it's got to be
mm,
really interesting to see like what you make just for you guys that you
no,
would
I
besides
know.
eggs, like what other stuff will come up, you know?
Yeah. Well, we'll report back on that. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we have also like had a lot of, it's not like the kids, I mean, they're teenagers, so they weren't home every single night anyway. So we've had practice with it. It's not going to be like as dramatic as I'm making it out to be, but
Yeah.
um we'll probably go out to dinner a lot more too, because like we just it's I was just listening to another podcast with Kelly Corrigan. She was interviewing Susan Orlean, and they were talking about empty nesting, and they said like one of the surprising things was that thing like they were amazed by how many performative things you do as a parent when there are kids in the house. Like,
Hmm.
and Susan was like, once my kid was out of the house, I thought I was going to be doing all these adult things, but I really just ended up eating cereal like on the couch and watching TV for dinner. So like there is part of me that totally gets that and feels like, oh, we might do that too. So I
Yeah, you
mean,
get to
not
be a kid yourself. That's
yeah,
great. Yeah.
just
Well, Jenny, this was so lovely,
mhm,
and I'm so excited for this book. I think the recipe I'm gonna make first is the tofu with the peanut sauce and the broccoli.
mhm. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's all
that
about
called
that
out to me.
sauce.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds great. But thank you for doing this podcast, and it's great to finally meet you.
Yeah, it's so nice to meet you, and I'm so honored you asked. So thank you.
Yeah, well, if you're ever in LA, let me know, and have a great fall.
Thank
All
you so much.
right, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, see you
Bye
later.
bye.